My name is Tessa Warrington. I'm a member of staff at the County Court in Leicester, and I'm a member of PCS and a rep in the branch. And what that means is I work to organise members and represent them when they have meetings with management, but also organise against policies that are brought in that are harmful to members, such as attacks on pay and terms and conditions, such as currently they're proposing nationally with the civil service to reduce the redundancy pay and cap that at 9 years service, at the same time that they're closing HMRC offices and making court closures. So there's potentially large amounts of staff about to be made redundant, and they want to cut the redundancy payout, and we organise staff to fight back against those things. I knew I wanted to join the union when I started work here. I even decided to get a job in the civil service because I knew that the PCS, the Public and Commercial Services Union, was a good union with a fighting leadership, and I was keen to be a part of that. But the reasons for being a member of the union is that as a worker, you are very much open to exploitation by management, but also by companies and businesses from the very top. So I think it's important to be a member of a union, not just for protection from the bullying and harassment that you can get from your line manager, but also because of the bad terms you can get in terms of low pay, extension of working hours, and other things that can be changed to make you work harder for less money, and all for the benefit of your employer. I think it's important to be a member of a union because as an individual you're vulnerable, you're very open to attacks and being singled out for punishment, and if you try to stand up for something as an individual, then it's quite easy for management to isolate you and reprimand you for it, and possibly people get the sack as a result. The point of being in a union is that we realise that the hardships we suffer as workers are a collective struggle, and the way to oppose that is by getting together and having strength and unity. And if you take action collectively as a workforce, it's a lot harder for employers to single out individuals, because they realise that by attacking one person they're attacking everybody, and there's the threat of rest of workers backing up to support individuals that are picked on by employers. So different unions organise in different workplaces. You get quite specific unions like the FBU, which is the Fire Brigade Union, which organises firefighters, and the NUT, which organises teachers, the National Union of Teachers. And then you also get quite large general unions like Unite and Unison, which are the result of mergers of smaller unions coming together to make larger unions that organise in more than just a specific workplace. So PCS specifically organises civil servants, so that's my department, the MOJ, but also DWP, HMRC, Land Registry, National Galleries, and many more. There are two different models of unions usually. One is called a servicing model, and one is called a membership-led model. PCS is a member-led union, which means that its structures are democratic, and the direction of the union and the decisions that are taken primarily from the grassroots membership. So our policy, the people who occupy the key roles in the union are democratically elected and chosen at our annual conference, annual delegate conference, ADC. Whereas as a servicing model, it could be a union like Unison, which advertises itself as more of an insurance for workers. It doesn't encourage people to become active, and it focuses on the services that union can provide for you. And a lot of the time that means that those unions are less democratic because they've got a less active and participating membership. And I think it's important for unions to be a member-led union and realise that the role of trade unions is about more than just representing members in individual meetings. It's about changing society on a wider level and organising working class people against the exploitation of business and the employer. I would say the majority of trade unions in this country have a presence in Leicester. You've got the Leicestershire and District Trades Council, which has representatives from PCS, Unite, Unison, as well as the GMB, the RMT, and they bring a lot of trade unionists from branches in different unions together. You've also got the NUT, the National Union of Teachers. You've got NAPO, which is for probation workers. You've got the CWU, which is for communication workers, and they're all present in Leicester. They might not be particularly visible outside the workplace, but if you're a worker in areas that are unionised, then there should be a union presence, and it's good to get involved. I think the main issues for the trade union movement as a whole today is a lack of strong leadership on the TUC, which is the Trade Union Council. I think the working class as a whole have never seen attacks on ourselves on the scale of the austerity before, and it is absolutely devastating. And the reality is that we do have the power to stand up and fight back, but when we've got leaders of trade unions like Dave Prentice of Unison, who consistently call off strike action that their members are calling for, settle for 1.1% when people's which is technically a pay cut, given that inflation is going up by much more, then it is holding back the ability of workers and trade unionists to fight back. And one of the key things to do is to try and transform the unions by fighting for socialists and real fighting trade unionists to become the leaders of those unions, and further democratise those unions, so that the anger and the will to take action over these things that is felt by the majority of the membership is also displayed by those at the top as well. I'd say one of the main challenges that we experience at the moment, and this is from the perspective of being in a public sector trade union, is that we are fighting an agenda from the government, an agenda of making cuts to the public sector in order to pay off the deficit, which in reality was using public money to bail out the banks and then taking that back from the public by cutting services and cutting jobs. Now, if we want to defeat that and save our jobs, stop the pay freeze, then it is not up to one union to fight that. If it was just left up to the PCS, for example, to fight against austerity, then we would be fighting a losing battle. It is absolutely crucial for unions to unite and take action together to oppose this, because as we can see with the junior doctors' struggle, absolutely every section of workers is under threat from the austerity agenda. And if we could see united action between not just the doctors, not just the teachers that are under threat of academisation, which is essentially privatisation of the education system, if we could see united strike action from across the public sector and across the private sector, people who are all public service users, we all rely on the NHS, then we could actually see a real challenge to the government and to austerity. And it's only through united action that we will see any kind of a change. So I think one of the key tasks is to build and put pressure on trade union leaders to take the united action that the rest of us see as absolutely critical. I think as we see things getting worse and the increase of zero-hour contracts and poverty pay, the fact that the new living wage does not apply to people under 25 and that people under 25 are the people in the most precarious employment on the lowest wages, I think that we're going to see the need for people to struggle. People need to take strike action as it is to fend off privatisation like they have done in People need to take strike action to fend off things like privatisation like they did in the land registry, but that hasn't fundamentally stopped it, and the land registry is now up for privatisation again in the same way that the Royal Mail has been privatised and other elements of the economy that were previously nationally owned. And so I think the need to struggle is absolutely key and will only increase. And what that should say is that the membership and the strength of the trade union movement would also naturally increase. But one of the problems is that a lot of trade unions aren't appealing to particularly younger workers who have grown up not seeing trade unions playing a key role in society and don't really understand what trade unions are for. When they come into the workplace, they don't see a trade union presence or the need to join one. And that means that there's large sections of workers who aren't organised, and because of that they're just getting lower wages, worse contracts, worse terms and conditions forced onto them by their employers. And I think it's a responsibility of the trade union movement to try and unionise those people. And I would say that the Bakers Union, Bafawu, is doing an absolutely fantastic job with their fast food rights campaign, trying to organise fast food workers who, as I said, are predominantly young and exploited on zero-hour contracts, and have had a fantastic victory recently in forcing McDonald's to actually increase the wages they pay their workers and provide decent contracts. And I think if we saw more unions taking that action, and young people could see that by being part of a union it would benefit their life and it would benefit themselves and their position in employment, then I think you would see the ranks of the trade union movement swelling with a new vibrant layer who could take part in the action that could get rid of the wider austerity agenda and threats on our living standards that are coming from this Tory government. As a PCS member, I'm obviously most aware of action that PCS has taken, and some of the things that we've been able to do recently is our members in the National Galleries in London took strike action to prevent their terms and conditions being absolutely decimated when it was proposed that the National Gallery would be privatised, and they took scores and scores of days of strike action, and these are workers who hadn't done so before, and they had a fantastic campaign, a really vibrant campaign, and were successful in that they managed to TUPE over their conditions. They won the London living wage for all members of staff, and they got a key rep, Candy Ubwin, reinstated, who had been suspended for the role she was playing in organising those striking workers. And I think the fact that they stuck to that action and then saw the gains from that will be a massive learning experience for the rest of the trade union movement. And I think you've also seen campaigns like that with the Ritzy workers, cinema workers in London that struck for the living wage, but also Hovis workers in Wigan who took strike action with the Bakers Union against zero-hour contracts and were actually successful in preventing zero-hour contracts being enforced in their workplace.